And also, I want to thanks to all our sponsors to provide the sessions. So as Raz mentioned a little bit, today I will try to cover up one of the major complaints that I mostly hear from our customers, how we can use to lifecycle services or other possibilities to troubleshoot our commerce issues. So in order to deep dive on this, I want to shed some light, and during this session, I will try to explain what are our capabilities. So before we jump into my session, let me introduce myself. I'm Ahmet Ziya Yıldırım. I'm reaching out to you from lovely Istanbul. It's very sunny weather today, luckily, and I'm working in Microsoft. It's been since 2016, and before that I was in the market around 10 years. And since X 3.0 version till now, I'm working over the Dynamics, the ERP, and my expertise, as Raz mentioned, over retail. So let's talk about today's agenda. So I will try to go step by step in this troubleshooting portion. First, I will start with the event viewer capabilities that we have in the DevBox environment, and then we will move to the sandbox and the production environment capabilities. So how we can use the LCS log search to troubleshoot any issue. And then after that, I will move into a new feature, which is announced after 10.0.23, which is operational insights, how you can enable this feature and how you can use it. It's a brief explanation, but I think that will be really, really important and beneficial for most of you, and that you maybe want to enable this and use it. And at the end of the session, I will try to demo the Azure Data Explorer capabilities. So we will together export an LCS log as a CSV file. Then we will ingest this from the Azure Data Explorer, and we can run some custom queries like we do in the application insight site. So by doing this, this will be also some exercise to, if you make your mind to move the application insights, the operational insights feature. And we will end today's session with the Q&A part. So let's jump into our first topic, event viewer capabilities. So as you see, we have commerce specific events in the event viewer when you are working on the DevBox. So in order to get this valuable logs, you have to do some things, some tasks. You have to complete some tasks to enable this. So these logs are actually nearly the same that you have on the LCS log search. So keep this in mind. Currently, some of these events are logged by various components, are sent to the debug event logs. So these events are verbose events that are logged at very high rates and are useful only for detailed debugging scenarios. So first thing first, you have to go to the application and services logs under Microsoft Dynamics, as you see here, and you can find the 3 event logs: commerce specific event logs, commerce retail server, modern POS, and the logging provider. So if you right click on the debug log and click enable log, then you will see the logs will flow, and you can see any log entry in there. So now you have the flow, now you have the events viewer logs, but how you can correlate events, because most of the people doing the retail troubleshooting failing in that part. So let's bring together the pieces. First, as a daily work, post client startup. So you come and start up the first post client, and when a user starts a post client, a new app session ID is generated, as you see here. And the app session ID is used to log every event that is instrumented in the post client. All events that are logged to Event Viewer and App Insights have this ID. So then the user signs in. And when a user signs in to a post client, a new user session ID is generated. The user session ID is used to log every event that is instrumented in the post client. All user events that are logged to the Event Viewer have this ID, and this is maintained for as long as the user is signed in. So when the current user signs out and the user signs in, a new user session ID is generated. So we will come to that part again when we are talking about the LCS log search. So after users sign in, post client makes some operations and post client calls to commerce scale units. Whenever post client makes a call to the commerce scale unit, the app session ID and the user session ID are sent as headers. We see in the request headers. So the commerce scale unit then logs an event for the incoming request. So heads up, the event for this is 5,000. So the event ID for this particular action is 5,000. So when you are querying the logs, when you are searching for specific events, so all these retail server calls start with the event ID 5,000. So this event includes those two IDs, also the activity ID. The activity ID is then also used for related events. The app session ID, user session ID, and activity ID are available in the event log where commerce scale unit is hosted. So they are also available in the LCS log search. And after that, requests activity on commerce scale unit. So every event that is logged as a part of commerce scale unit request has the same activity ID as the initial event that was logged for the initial incoming request events. Like in the retail call, it's events ID 5,000. These events are available in both Event Viewer and LCS log search. So to identify, for example, you are troubleshooting modern post events in your dev box, so you can find app session ID and the user session ID values on the details tab of the Event Viewer in the modern post Event Viewer components. So you can find it and you can then reach out the data if you are searching for a exception for a specific event, specific action on the event handler. So you can find them all in this tab. To correlate data for incoming commerce scale unit requests in Event Viewer, first you must enable the analytic channel as seen here under commerce retail server components. So in the Event Viewer, in the left pane, go to the commerce retail server. First, it will come empty, click view, then enable analytic and debug log. And a new node for the analytical change appears under the commerce retail server logging provider. Right click again, analytical node, and then click enable log. And then you can see the log will flow. So this was in your dev box. So how we can do in the LCS? How we can read the LCS telemetry? So we have two major IDs. One of them application session ID, and second one is the user session ID. App session ID is the specific to the POS. It's GUID session that defines the running instance of the POS. And heads up, when you restart the POS, the session change. And user session ID is the specific to the POS. It's GUID session that defines the that specific logon session on the POS. And example, POS starts up, it's issued an app session ID. As you see, it's a GUID, then cashier logs in there, issued, it's issued a user session ID, and then cashier logs out, and new cashier logs into the same POS. App session stays same, user session is now a difference. Activity ID field you can find in the LCS log search. You can filter by activity ID, but what is activity ID? So this is a GUID that uniquely identifies all actions for a specific operation. If we should give an example, you call retail server API, the HTTP start event and HTTP stop events, and all CRT code that executed within that HTTP requests are tagged with the same activity ID. So keep in that mind. This field is available for both POS and CSU telemetry logs. However, be aware that activity ID at the POS is not as the same as activity ID on the CSU. It's unique each process and operation. Also, there is another field called as correlation ID. This should not sound so much familiar, but let's shed some light on it. So it's similar to the activity ID, but on smaller scale. For example, usually any start-stop operation on the POS and any code that executed within that operation tagged with this correlation ID. So I put an example here. For example, 46800 events. So the events ID is 46800. Extensibility framework execute runtime request started. So this event end with 46802 extensibility framework execute runtime request failed event. So you can filter by writing to the search term the correlation ID, and then you can find two correlates, client sites, post sites events, and make your analysis. And after that, we have request ID. So when you call an CSU API, a unique request ID is generated. So not each LCS log entry will have this request ID for the post site, because if it can be either calling an API, CSU API, or doing some client sites, maybe an extensibility code execution or UI code execution. So when you call, so this request ID will exist in both POS and CSU logs. So you can take the request ID from the POS side and you can filter the CSU logs to find what's happening on the CSU side. You can use this value to match CSU logs to a POS log. So you can do vice versa. On CSU telemetry request ID will typically only show the HTTP start and stop events. However, these events will contain the activity ID, which you can then search on to see everything that happened within the HTTP call and CSU. So let's say you have the request, but you don't know what's happening on the backend, on the channel side. So if you get this activity ID and when you filter it by that, then you can find which stored procedures executed on the channel database. So you can see more information about the call stack and what's happening behind the scenes in that request. So if you want to do this, you have to jump to the activity ID. So we will come to that part again. Let's continue with the other fields. Another important field on the LCS log search is row limit. So it comes default as 50. And as it sounds, how many records you want to view at one time. So if you want to have more, the first thing first, you have to come here and increase the limit from 50 to 5,000. So 5,000 is the top for that. So I can hear a question. So what if we want more than 5,000 records? So in the demo, I will show you. So you can export these logs 5,000 by 5,000 and import it to the Azure Data Portal, to the Azure Data Explorer, or you can enable the operational insights and you can drill down to the data and you can find more data there. So as you wish. But in the LCS, we have a limitation like this. So for the search term box, this will search across all columns in telemetry to see if they contain the value you entered. So unfortunately, LCS does not display every telemetry column. So sometimes you will get results back, but you will not be able to see that term because it's a hidden column. So as you see on the right-hand side, there's a link called as show column options on the LCS. So when you click it, you can see two boxes side by side. And on the left-hand side, you can see the available columns, which can be hidden columns. And when you add them and bring them from left side to right side, then you can, when you run the query again, you can find this hidden columns may be important and you can use it for. Another important part is the device ID. So this is the rec ID for the device ID record. As Microsoft doesn't expose the actual device ID anymore, since it's considered the customer identifier information. For the user also as well, another customer identifier information. Therefore, this will be the GUID value that represents the user and not specific name. So now we got familiar with these fields. So how we can, what's the best approach to read this telemetry and how we can go further? So always start at the post level. If you are the end user contacting with Microsoft about your issue, or you are an end user contacting with your partner, or you are a partner with some specific issue on the post side contacting with Microsoft, all of them, the first thing first, you should gather up the session information ID, the application session ID and the user session ID. So in order to do that, on the right upper corner, there's a cog. So click this cog and you will direct it to this page and take the session information, application session ID and user session ID from here. So very next thing you have to do is come to that page, come to your activity tab in your environment monitoring, under your environment monitoring, and under the row logs, you have to select retail channel events, not all events, all logs. You have to go to the retail channel events because these are retail specific events and already filtered events. So it will be easier to find what you are looking for when you select this query. So after you select this query, filter on time to when you repro something. So when you want to repro something, you have to filter, you have to downtime, you have to narrow down the timeline. Then use this post log to locate the request ID to the retail server. So let's think about this. The end user explain the situation to you. You ask them, so okay, I will check what's happening. You get the application ID, user session ID. You put them into the filter as it's seen here. And then you also narrow down the time frame, you know that. And when you run the query, you see there's an error and the log line has the request ID. So note this request ID and have this. And now before that, under the retail channel events, we were using retail cloud post as the log source. But now we have the request ID. Remember, for the post side and the CSU side, on the both ends, we have the request ID. And switch and change the log source to the retail cloud scale units. So now we have the CSU logs here and filter for request ID. And when you filter for request ID here, you can reach out to the error message. So now I can see the error message, but still it's not rings a bell for me. So I know this request, this HTTP request return an error, and it's more now. I have more than what the user sees in front of his or her computer. Now I have more detailed message, but it's not still enough. So I need more information. Then I have to capture the activity ID, and by after having this activity ID, I can filter again the cloud scale unit with this activity ID this time. So when I filter with this activity ID now I can see, as I said before, you can see which store procedures are running on the background, what's the call stack. So more information regarding to that request will be available and you can see it. So that's the majority of the LCS troubleshooting, and that should be the best approach to do. Go over from that way. Start from the getting the application session ID and user session ID. Check for the request ID. Get the request ID. Filter again. This time the cloud scale unit, and after get this time, if you want more details, filter by the activity ID. So now it's more. Now we can troubleshoot issues on test environment, sandbox environment, and the production environments, but we need more. So we know this is hard to troubleshoot by the LCS or from the event viewer. So because of this, now Commerce Product Group released a new feature. It's available after 10.0.23 for specific CSUs, and after 10.0.26, it's available for every CSUs. It's called as Operational Insights. So what's the needs behind it to release a new feature like this? So customers don't have an easy way to access logs for commerce products they have purchased. Troubleshooting issues becomes a lengthy process and usually involves contacting Microsoft support, and customers can't monitor the health and the performance of their products. So because of these reasons, now with the operational insights, the app insights, for those who doesn't know what's app insights, it's the log, the same log as actually the Microsoft engineers using to troubleshoot the commerce environment. So this is now available for our customers by the help of this operational insights feature. So as I mentioned, it's available since 10.0.23, but after 26 version and later for the all CSUs, it's available. So how to enable diagnostic events in application insights? So first, you have to have an application insights account. So first, you have to go to the Azure portal, and to enable commerce component diagnostic events, you must have an application insights account. So you can use either existing one or create a new account. To create a new account, when you landed to the Azure portal, you choose for the application insights, and when you click for the create a new account for application insight, you can see on the right hand side form. And when you fill up this form, you can ready to go after clicking the review and create. You create a new application insights feature under your Azure portal. So there's one heads up for that. For data privacy reasons, we recommend that use separate application insights accounts for production, sandbox, and development environments. After you have an account, you must enable the operational insights feature in Commerce headquarters. Now we have the application insights for the Azure site. So how we can enable the diagnostic events in application insights in Commerce headquarters? First, you have to enable this feature. Go to Feature Management Workspace within the application, enable the Operational Insights feature, then go to System Administration, Operational Insights, and then on the Configure tab, set the Commerce Channel Events option to Yes. And then on the Environment tab, enter LCS environment ID and environment mode values for every environment where you plan to use application insights. You can find each environment's LCS environment ID on the environment details page for that environment in the LCS. So this step is required to prevent diagnostic events from being inadvertently sent to an incorrect environment when database copy operations are performed. So please be aware of that. And after that, on the Application Insights Registry tab, specify the Application Insights instrumentation key and corresponding environment mode of the environments, where you plan to use each Application Insights account. And finally, after we have completed the preceding configuration, send it to the channels by running the CDX jobs 1110. It must run, and you can wait for this job to run its own schedule, or you can manually run it. Then the final step, restart each commerce scale unit in LCS by going to environment details, commerce, manage, and select the commerce scale unit instance. And one by one, you have to restart all of them. So that's enable. You have the application insights, you have the HQ side, you enable it, and now time to query. So as you see here, you can open up the Custo query page, and you can write on your own Custo query, and you can query the log files, and as you see, you are much more you have much more freedom than the LCS, and you can write your own queries and deep dive into the logs that you have, and you can check for example, this one's a sample for the hardware station. In the middle, there's a sample query for the CSU, and on the right hand side, you can find a sample query for the POS. So if you enable this, and you can use it, and you can, if you know a bit about how to write the Custo queries, then you can write your own queries. And in the demo, I will show you Azure Data Explorer, for example, and then in there you can create your own dashboards, and you can follow up. You can use this feature to monitor. Beside the troubleshooting, you can also use it to monitor your commerce environment. So that's a really important and significant feature. So now I will switch to demo, and I will show you on the Azure Data Explorer side how you can export, how you can ingest the exported data from the LCS, and how you can use it. So let's open up our Azure Data Explorer sites. So for today, I prepare 3 scripts before getting in them. So let's show you my cluster. So for those who are not very familiar with this, so this is the cluster part. This is my cluster. Under my cluster, I can create my database. So I create the database called my database, and under this database, I can ingest my own data, import my own data. So I created, as you see, here's my free cluster, and under that, I have my database. So now I want to ingest a new data. So for here, I'm selecting the cluster, and under it, I select my database, and I can either use an existing table to import data, or I create a new table. For the demo purposes, I will create a new table. I call it CPOS demo. So it asks me what will be the source type. Source type can be blob container. I can get data from my data lake, or it could be a file. Today I will use the file, CSV file, to import. So I choose this one, drag and drop. Now I will wait. So it's already verified it, and now I can move on. So now it's verifying the schema, and here you can see all my data that I got from the LCS. So in here, before, as a last resort, before importing this data, here I can change the data type. I can add new column, maybe a calculated column. I can delete some or update some column, or I can change the order. If you are familiar with this syntax, then you can also have this copy and save it somewhere for your next imports, or you can change it from here writtenly. So I select ignore the first record because my first record is my header. And then when I select the next start ingestion, it will complete the ingestion for me. So now I have my data, log data inside the Azure Data Explorer in my cluster. So you can see event severity warnings are yellow, and the event severity error ones, log entries seems as the red ones. And I can now have all my information here. So when I say close, now I can see the CPOS demo cluster table is here. Let's try to reach out to all the data. So when I run this, I can have all the data in my table. So I now show you how to ingest LCS log data here. As I said, there is a limitation for 5,000. For example, maybe daily you can get 5,000 rows error files, the CSV files, and import them into here to have the historical data, or for other purposes, for other scenarios. So you can pile up your data in Azure Data Explorer. So I bring some of the queries here for the cloud posts. Let's begin with the first one. So with this one, I can check in my cloud posts, which is under the retail channel events. You remember the cloud post source log. So this is got from there 5,000 logs, records that taken from there. And what I check here, as you see, I got the first 10 of them. I got all the CPOS devices by the location, by their version, and on which Windows version they are running. So I can have all the information. I can create my own chart. So this log is, if stays in the LCS, it's only record by record you can see. But when you ingest it in here, you can play on them. It's more talented and more you have more capabilities to do something that you can do on Excel. So you can export to Excel and you can work on it, but you can use this Custo language to get more meaningful data. And please also bear in mind the operational insights. When you enable the operational insights, you use the same syntax, same Custo language on the application insights, in the operational insight as well. So another query is here to get how many cloud post records you have in the CPO. So I have 91 distinct device logs in my CPOS log in here. So if you want to track down a specific app session ID, like here, then what you should do, put a work condition, write app session ID, write the GUID here for the app session, and then run this query. So you can find all log entries for the specific events, specific app session ID. So I can find the event time, the application word. There are many more columns in here, so you can use. So one thing also I want to mention, there's a limitation when you are ingesting data. The limitation is 200 columns. So if you exceed the 200 columns limits while ingesting, then it can throws an error. So you have to remove some of the columns when you are ingesting. It's for the CSU and the CPOS, mostly column count less than 200. But for the modern posts, as far as I remember, it's more than 200, around 250 or something. So please take into account when you are ingesting data. And another important point, so sometimes it's nice to get an idea of what all errors are. The use of the text fields to describe errors is not consistently used, so it's better to use the event IDs and map them to the correct errors. So as you can see, I already done this mapping thing. So they can be looked up in two commerce SDK file. First, for the client side, the post retail logger, and also Dynamics Retail Diagnostics things.man file. So these two files you can find under Commerce SDK files, and you can check this mapping. So when you write them, and let's run this query. Now under the CPOS, I can see the error, the event distribution under the CPOS. So you see 47003 extension information, and there are many more. As you see, there are 3 events, 47001, 002, and 003. Extensional information, warning, and error. So extension error means something for me because it's indicating there's an error. So how many of them? So 3 of them is here. So then you rewrite your query and get exactly what these errors are and which device throw it, or which app session ID, which user session ID throws it, and when it's happened. So much more information. So you can, from the higher levels to the down levels, you can go down and deep dive into these error troubleshooting. So these are the client side events, and this for the CPOS. Now I'm jumped to the Retail Cloud Scale Unit CSU side issues. So as you remember in our first query, as you remember, the event ID 5000 means the retail server called starts event, and 5009 is retail server finish events. So I join same table with each other on activity ID to find what's happened between this start and stop event. So between the start and stop event, it's actually the call itself. So if you want to troubleshoot, you have to identify and put down this where conditions. So for which condition you can use this, or for which situation you can use this query. This can be used to identify slow retail server calls. So let's run it same time. Once the slow call is found, you could use the activity ID to get more details for that call. So you can order by the duration, get the slow call, and then you can drill down what is it. For the privacy issues, I hide the I not put it API controller, API action, and request URI columns, but when you call it and when you run it, you will have the exact information. Another important query that I bring here, slow custom code execution. So this is a specific event ID 1017. It logged every time CRT handler or trigger execution on customized core or out-of-box code. So if it takes then more than 200 milliseconds, then it's logged as 1017. And you can see here are the activity IDs. So why it's taking so much time? That's another thing that you have to check for it. Another one is to see how the execution time goes for the API action, retail API action. So for example, in the top, I take top 2 and I use the render keyword. So now by the help of the render keyword, I can create my own charts. So you can bring these charts together and you can create your own dashboard and you can bring your own monitor. So as you see here, the search by fields API call 90% till it's around the 5,500 milliseconds. And the next one is the checkout, which is the longest duration API call. So another sample is the similar. Now I map the event IDs here, and when you run this, you can see the event distribution for the cloud scale units. So as you see here, retail server request started 5,000 times and it's finished 5,009 times. So you see some of them not finished. This could be the error ones, but most of them have the start and finished. And you can, as you see, 1017 CRT slow handler execution, 25 of them already logged in this log. And you can find other, for example, CRT commerce runtime execute request warning failure or retail server request warning failure. These are the other candidates that you have to check for it. So finally, what we have is the modern post related queries. Again, I joined in this query the modern post table, again, the modern post table. This time I'm checking for the retail operations, start and completed events, 40,252, 40,253. So when I run it, I can see how much time it takes a one retail operation for the modern post. So I can see in the latency column, actually, I'm subtracting start time from the end time, and I can see the difference between them. So for the privacy, I don't add these columns, but when you add this, you can find more information, and you can then drill down and go why these retail operations takes too much time. So you can make further analysis on your modern posts. So now I want to talk about another feature recently available. So for the offline DB availability, we actually implement the new dashboard that customer can use to get the offline status on various registers. So this one within the application, so you can, this lets you to monitor your offline DBs for your modern post devices. So these are the same information. For the privacy, I commented here, but when you run it, you can find your own. You can see if this modern post supports offline. So the SQL Express or installed or everything's in place, and if it supports or not offline working. So if now it's working offline or not, so you can check. And on the third column, it shows you if recently went offline or not. So these two columns may help you to monitor the health of offline DB availability to you. So this information, as I said, already available in the dashboard. So for the proof of concept, I put it here so you can develop, you can maybe work on and create your own queries to bring some additional features to your monitoring. So another one is, this is also available in the new feature for the offline DB monitoring dashboard, which is helping to you how much data is in your offline DB. So you can see the use data, use log in GB, and so as let's say you are using SQL Express for your offline DB. So how much volume it's taking. So that's important, and you have to monitor it. So the event ID 6846 shows you the log database info. So this log entries are for the log database info, and you can use this. There are other fields, for example, for the privacy. I don't use the role instance, but when you use it, you will have the device name and you can have this information. So as I said, there are many possibilities that you can do by modifying, changing these queries and find your own queries. With the trial and error, also you can find many valuable information. And finally, again, in the same post retailer logger or from this assembly file, when you run it, you can find the distribution of the events for the modern post. So it's different from the CPOS. As you see, the post-initiated hardware station request started event in here. So because the hardware station connects to the modern post, and you can have this events as well. Trigger execution started, trigger execution completed. So you can see the trigger events. You can see the CDX events for the modern post. Again, the extension information, and there are lots of more events that's happening in here, so you can use it. CRT slow handler execution, like here we have. And these are the event distribution. And finally, we can check the error events. And when we run it, so as we see, these are the post-initiated hardware station request failed. So there are 2 events for the 450. So you can use and then change the query, put the event ID in the where condition, and get the activity ID, and then go further and analyze further. So this concludes my demo. So I also put the resources that you can find further queries or the further information that I covered already. So thanks for listening to me and joining today. I hope I know it's a much more technical, but I think that's in the community I've for a long time, I have been asked with these questions how we can troubleshoot the commerce side for with the LCS. Now, as my last words, I can say that if I were you, I will go first with the operational insights, enable it, and dirty my hands with the custo, dive into custo, what I can do. So this all operational insights really promising, and it can help most of us. So thank you again, and thank you, Raz. Thank you, the Power Community Organization, and you can find my contact information here as well.
Thank you, Ahmet. Awesome. Okay, so just looking at the questions. Right, so there's a question here. Okay, event viewer, right. So there's a question in relation to the event viewer is available on which type of box tier?
So for the event viewer, so you need a box with an RDP access. So for the RDP access, you only have your dev boxes, so tier 1 environments. So tier 2 and plus environments, so you don't have the RDP access anymore, so you can't have this event viewer information. Event viewer only available for dev boxes. The same information in the event viewer is available on the LCS log, and if you enable the feature, it's also available in the operational insights.
Great, okay. And he follows on by asking, okay, nope, that's answered his question. Excellent. Ahmed, are you able to share those links, the reference links in the chat by any chance?
Yes, so I created the PDF version of this presentation. So in a minute, I will share it in the chat with the PDF version of this, the presentation.
Excellent. Thank you so much. You're right. And could you also share your connection so that I'm sure a lot of the commerce community would love to keep in touch with you in relation to what they're up to. I think it would be a good opportunity for them as well if you could share your connection details in the chat.
Yeah, absolutely.
Excellent. Okay. So there's a question by Mustafa asking, is this tool available in RSSU?
So
basically, yeah.
Unfortunately, for the time being, the RCSU is I think he is referring to the operational insights. For time being, it's not available for RSSU, but it will be available after some time.
Okay, any other questions? Let's take a look. Okay, so I don't see any other questions for the time being.
Can I ask a question, Raj, if you may allow me, please?
Oh, yes, please, Sahib. Yes, please.
Yeah. So, Ahmed, this is great process you have shown, but you were specifically talking about the retail. Do you think anything like this could be done for other parts of the Dynamics? Like in Dynamics also, we have logs on the LCS, and we can see those on the LCS in the telemetry. Do you think any process could be done to diagnose the other areas of Dynamics as well?
That's a great question. For time being, operational insights only available for the retail part, but in the upcoming days, it would be also available for the FinOps side. What exists for today, if you ask? I show you the LCS part. So to use the Azure Data Explorer. So you can use the same thing in the demo. Instead of the retail channel events, you can export the all logs, and you can use the same Azure Data Explorer's similar queries. And you can use the same structure exactly for the FinOps as well. So please, whenever you hand over this presentation, there is a official our official documentation. So let me show it quickly. So use Azure Data Explorer to query raw information logs. At the end, there are queries for retail, but on the other one, sorry, this one, in this, let me check again. Okay, this one. At the end of this one, you can see also some samples for the FinOps size as well. You see, so you can check for all errors, for example. So you can export the all error events, and you can use this query to get all errors for the FinOps sites. You can use the Custo query. Or, for example, you can use slow select queries. So you can use the LCS slow query source and then export them and import from the Azure Data Explorer, and you can use this, and you can get these slow queries for the select, and there will be an output like this. Similar for insert, deletes, and another sample is batch jobs performance. So you can use the selection all logs, and then add query where task name equals batch finished one task in LCS diagnostic, and you can run this query, and this time you can have the execution count for a specific job, duration in milliseconds, and the duration in milliseconds for the percent. So it depends on what you want to play on it. So the possibility is nearly endless. So in a nutshell, you can use it for both retail portion and also for the FinOps portion.
Yeah, thanks. And I think my voice is bouncing back. For the FinOps outside the retail, the application insights are there for a long time. I'm not sure about the operational insights.
Exactly. thanks for bringing this as well. The application insights, you can inject your own retail logger logic into your own customization, and you can use the application insights for it. But the default code, default application insight was not available for a long time. But now, within the application, when you enable this feature, the telemetry which is emitting from the Microsoft default code will be available as well. So, and you can check this telemetry. But what was available is you can inject one line of code in your customization, in your extension, and then from the application insight, you can monitor what's happening in your customization. By the way, this still is available. So if you have some customizations, you can inject your one line of code for the as a retail logger, and then you can check the application insights.
All right, thank you. Thanks for answering the questions.
You're welcome. You're very welcome.
Okay, right. Well, that's great. I think we've come to a great conclusion. And thank you once again, Ahmet, for obviously being able to present today. Always always get a lot of great feedback from your sessions and from your knowledge sharing. So we look forward to hopefully seeing you next time in person.
Yeah, yeah, but you remember this, so it's
I definitely, yes,
remaining from Dubai, so it's a bit of nostalgic. So I choose to wear this today. I really miss the physical and face-to-face events, really, Raz. And thanks for organizing this. It's kind of a tradition, and it's been more than 2 years, 3 years. So I hope you will come much better places with your organization, and it's really helping the community, and I really want to appreciate you for this.
Thank you so much, Ahmet. Thank you. Fantastic. Awesome, guys. So there you go. Okay, well, so now